15th episode of Palmetto Politics. We're excited to have you folks joining us. I am Shannon Grady, and that's my co-host,
John Cummings. Good morning.
And today we're very excited to have former congressional candidate Barbara Arthur join us today to talk about this House Bill 4066. Those of you who have been listening to our podcast, we've talked about it multiple times. It has passed in a particular version and is now making its way to the Senate. So we wanted to have Ms. Barbara Arthur on to talk a little bit about what she feels is problematic with this bill. So please let's welcome Barbara Arthur.
Good morning. Glad to be with you.
Good morning, Barbara.
Good morning, Barbara. So, Barbara, I know we were talking with you prior to starting the show about your concerns, and just share first of all with the folks what has changed, because initially the ruling was, that was going to be capped. I think it was 501 people could attend the state convention, right. And then we'll talk about the fee dropping from 5,000 to 750. Okay. But what is your take on what they've now tried to adjust this to?
Well, first, just the history of the bill. I'm very concerned with it. The fact that Mr. McKissick was the one who was trying to push a bill which will alter the state rules, the GOP rules, knowing that only the delegates at the state convention can alter the rules, amend it in any way. He had to go around that and try to have a law passed. That in itself, it just smells really, really bad. And it bothers me greatly, because if you want to do something like that, then step down. His first priority should be to the party and to the people of South Carolina, but apparently it's not. Apparently his priority is for himself, and capping delegates does not help the party. He is constantly asking people for money, for the silver elephant. If I were a donor, I would be livid. Why would you want to hinder the party from growing? And so what I'm hearing from a lot of people is that they will not have proper representation, because there have been so many new people moving into the state. And when you cap that, they don't have representation. There's no good reason. Their excuse was venue. They didn't have a venue large enough, which is nonsense. The convention center in Columbia is more than adequate. And even it was proposed, just raise the money from 15 to 20, or 25, and it'll cover the expense. So there was no good reason for it. Shannon, it is definitely what you call a bad bill. Yes. And I'm really upset about it, because we went to talk to these representatives in person, to the young man that filed it, Representative Brad Newton. And we begged him and said, look, please don't do this. There is no good reason. This does not help South Carolina. And spoke with Representative of Florence J. Jordan also. And basically they're just looking down their nose at us, and we're going to do whatever we want. And they're only helping Mr. McKissick. They are not helping their district. They're not helping South Carolina. And we've come to a point where we're going to be upset with this. We're going to try to get these people primaried. And we got a group of people doing it. It's more than just talk. At this point, talk doesn't do anything.
Right.
But we're going to try to get these people primary, because enough is enough.
Ultimately, my question was, and I know you're not an attorney, Barbara, but this bill in and of itself, to me, I would think it would be unconstitutional when it comes to the state constitution of South Carolina, because what you're basically trying to do is legislate party activity. And to me, that doesn't seem legal to me. Any feedback on that?
I really, like you said, I really don't know about the legislation part of, or the legality of it. However, it just doesn't smell right. It does not smell good. Why would the party chair seek to hinder the growth of the party at the convention? So what my friends are saying is, why should we invite new members to our GOP meeting when they're not going to be able to attend the convention? Because so it just doesn't smell good. And I'm very concerned, because this is happening quite a bit.
Right. Well, in terms of the constitutional aspect, let me cover that with you. It actually does violate the South Carolina Constitution. Under Article 3, Section 17 of the South Carolina Constitution, it requires that a bill address only one single subject. This bill addresses two very unrelated subjects. One is the state party convention delegation number and apportionment. That's Title 7, Chapter 9. And the procedures for contesting a state party primary election result, which are two different things. That's Title 7, Chapter 17. Right. So these things are separate. They should have been filed to address one another separately. And so this bill should either be amended to strike section 1 or it should strike sections 2 through 5. But whichever the case, it is a bad bill. And even if you split it up into 2 separate bills, instead of having 1 bad bill, you'd have 2 bad bills, in my opinion.
The legislators knew that. They knew exactly what you just said. So why did they allow this to happen?
Because they frequently go ahead and thwart the Constitution. I mean, I hate to say this. People always talk about Washington, D.C. being a swamp. But I said, listen, I think John said it best last Tuesday, that a swamp is the wrong term, because a swamp is actually a healthy organism. It's a cesspool.
Yes,
and we have it right here in Columbia, South Carolina.
Yes, we do.
These folks are just a microcosm of what we then see at the national level. The national level certainly does not pay attention to our U.S. Constitution. And here we see state legislators not paying attention to our state Constitution. And in fact, I would argue that a lot of them are completely unaware, have never seen a copy of it, don't even know what it looks like.
I agree with that. Most people don't even know the state rules for the GOP party. And I've made effort to make sure I know the rules so I know what I'm talking about. But it's crazy, specifically with the fact that we're not supposed, this bill, if it becomes law, will affect the GOP rules. And Mr. McKissick knows it very well. And again, I mentioned this earlier, only the delegates at the state convention have the authority, according to the rules, to amend the rules in any way. So Mr. McKissick has to go around that.
Well, let me ask you, have you been active in the Darlington GOP?
I have, and exposing the corruption. So I haven't exactly been the good guy.
Right.
And now I'm doing what I have to do, because they're very much in favor. What they're saying is we have the most conservative House that we've ever had. Yeah. And I'm saying, are you kidding me?
Right.
And I'm exposing what's going on, and the bills that they're passing, and it's just wrong. They're not awake, and I don't understand. Right. It's like we are the bluest red state. We are no longer a red state.
Correct.
We are
deep purple, leaning blue.
Blue. And so what is Mr. McKissick doing right?
Nothing.
I'm very concerned about that. And yes, we continue to use the name Mr. McKissick, but it's because he's the one leading the party right now, and it's not going in a good direction. And I'm very
I would agree.
And at the state convention, we need to make a change.
Yeah, and of course, with the excuse that they always cite, and I'll take this personally, is that, what's changing the complexion of the party is the people coming down from up north. And that is not the case. No, it's not the case. There aren't a lot of Northerners in Columbia. Let's be honest. I mean, there's just not a lot of them. The people that are doing this are part of what it's the uniparty. That's the establishment up there. What you really have is 3 parties. I mean, you have the hard left, and then you have this middle group, which is Democrats and Republicans, and it's predominantly Republicans. And then you have the Freedom Caucus. So you basically have 3 parties going on up there. Unfortunately, the largest one is this middle group, this quote unquote uniparty, that if you watch what they're doing at every level, it flies in the face of conservatism, because it's all big government stuff. It's all involving the government in things that the government is not designed to handle. And it backfires every single time. And that's something that we're trying to point out. And I know you, Barbara, are trying to point out as well.
Yes, sir, indeed. And you're correct. And they're the ones that we're targeting. We have a group of ladies throughout the state, and we're going to target these so-called Republicans that are voting like Democrats. And the arrogance is great. They're not listening to their constituents. We had many people call, let's say, I'm just going to take Florence, for example. Many people call, text their representative, Jay Jordan, do not vote for this bill. Well, guess what? He voted anyway.
Yep.
And that's very upsetting. It's just, there's an arrogance there. And I think it's that they believe they're safe. And they've just been doing it this way for a very long time.
Right.
And they believe they're safe, and things have changed. And whether we want to bring it back to COVID or not, or what happened, but a lot of corruption has been exposed, and we're going to target this corruption. And it's got to stop, because our state is just following the direction of our nation.
Yes.
And we really want to stop that. We want to put an end to that. We cannot allow that.
I agree with you. And in fact, what John said earlier, it really resonated with me. The fact that, a lot of folks want to say, well, the reason why our state is turning so purple or blue is because of the influence of folks from out of state. But right here in Horry County, let's take, for example, Heather Crawford, always been from here. Luke Rankin, as far as I know, has been here. In fact, in the early 90s, all the way through 2004, he ran as a Democrat, then converted to Republican so that he could continue to win. Val Guest is originally from Greenville, South Carolina, if I'm not mistaken. So he's not from Horry, but he is still from the state. I think Case Britton is from this area. Russell Fry famously noted that he grew up here. And so it's not that we have this influence of people from out of state that are then getting into office, as John was saying earlier. So I agree with you, John. And I agree with everything you're saying, Barbara. It is so essential that we focus on our local politicians and our state politicians, because if we don't get their attention, and they won't listen to us, as you've noted, you try to get in touch with Mr. Jordan and Jay Jordan, and he just ignored you and went ahead and voted. Because from what we've been told, John and I were explained that Merle Smith, who's sort of the head, the mafia godfather, if you will, up there, whatever he says, the rest of those folks just get in line. They go into their little private caucus meeting for their lunch or their dinner, and they tell them, okay, here's these are your marching orders. You're going to vote this way, this way, this way. And then they just, like little dutiful soldiers, they go back and they vote that way, regardless of what the folks say. A great example of that, and I wish I could put this clip up, I've shared it numerous times on our page, was when they had the bill before the House to crony capitalism, to give the millions and then billions of dollars to VW and Scout. And Freedom Caucus Chairman Adam Morgan was standing and speaking and saying that he was going to listen to his constituents. I'm sure you've seen this.
Oh, yeah.
And then Todd Rutherford stands up and says, you're not going to listen to the commerce. They've had all this success, and, you should be listening to them. And he said, I'm sure you believe that, Representative Rutherford, but no, I believe that my job is to represent my constituents. And as long as they're telling me that I need to vote against this, that is exactly what I'm going to do, because that's the task. That's the job that I've been tasked with. And I think far, far too many, both Republican and Democrat representatives, have forgotten the word representative and what it means. And they go up there to represent their own special interests, their own big business, their own ideologies. And they don't give a flip about what we, the people, actually think. And so I am so happy to hear that John and I and some others are not the only ones pushing back, and that there are a multitude of groups across our state, kind of, whether we realize it or not, coalescing around the same common theme of either you vote the way we, the people, want you to vote, or we're going to get you out. We're going to primary you.
Yeah. And I'm sure, and John, what you were saying about people coming in from out of state, while I was campaigning, I met a lot of people, and I'll tell you, most of them were conservative, and that's why they're coming here. They were trying to get away from their liberal states. They were thinking they were coming to and I read it on the posts all the time. I thought I was moving to a conservative state, when in fact, it's becoming very liberal, and it's because of the so-called Republicans that we have in the House and in the Senate at the moment. So we definitely need to target that. Yeah,
no doubt. And I'll tell you a little story. When I first got down here, I won't make this too long. I was contacted by people in and around the Trump campaign to run in South Carolina 7 for Tom Rice's seat. Well, anyway, we did a poll of registered Republican voters in Horry County. 40% of them were from Ohio. 40%, and only 7% of registered Republican voters who were active in Horry County, only 7% were native South Carolinians. Wow. So to say, oh, it's just a recent thing, it's these people that are moving down here, is nonsense. But they need to point at something to deflect the attention that they're getting. And you know what? It's all out of the same handbook. If you look what this establishment Republican group is doing in that regard, and also the way they handle the media is basically, the communications arm of the Uniparty in Columbia. You watch local media here, everything is fluff, and Yahoo, they're doing a great job, and there's no investigative reporting regarding bills. So people like us, I guess, we have to fill the void.
We need to shine light on everything that's going on, and we need to educate, and not stop. And that's what I'm doing. And that's why I'm not a friend of the GOP here, because they really have it in the dark. They don't know. They think we have the most conservative Republicans in the House.
Yes, we don't.
And they have no clue. And I'm trying to say, look, they're treating the Freedom Caucus terribly. These men and women are standing up for truth, and they're standing up for what is right, and yet they're really being treated poorly, and that in itself is very concerning.
Well, I know when back when they were voting on the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, and the Freedom Caucus in the United States House stood up and said,
Right.
"We want some changes made before we're going to vote for you," because Kevin McCarthy is not a conservative; he's a moderate. And so I applauded what the Freedom Caucus did, and there were folks here that old guard
Yeah.
leadership, Dreamer Purdue. I'll use her name because she was out there saying that these guys were far right extremists. And she thinks the same thing of the Freedom Caucus here in South Carolina, that we're far right extremists. And that nothing could be further from the truth. If you think that upholding your responsibility as a representative and voting the way your constituents want makes you a far right extremist, then I guess I'm a far right extremist, because I genuinely believe if I'm elected to a position to represent the people. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that you never take your own personal interests into account, because you yourself are a constituent. But if there's something that comes up and it doesn't violate the U.S. Constitution, it doesn't violate the South Carolina Constitution, but it violates your personal
Right.
opinion, but the constituents that you represent largely want that to be passed, then you have to put yourself aside and vote for the majority.
Yeah, and if the candidates are vetted properly, they would know that person. And that's why, back to the precinct level, you really need to start vetting these candidates better and really know who they are, and know that when they're put in a situation like that, how would they vote? What are their morals? What are their beliefs? That's important. And we just have not really paid much attention. We have trusted that these representatives are going to do right. Well, it's time to stop trusting, because I believe there's I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but there is an agenda to take down the South. There is.
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, BLM and Antifa, and there's plenty of articles out there. People can do a research on that. They're targeting the conservative states, and it really baffles me that our state chair would go along with it. I'm not saying he's working with them. I'm not saying that at all, because I don't know that. But he is definitely helping them, and many of the things that he's doing. He is not helping to turn our state conservative. On the contrary, it's turning more liberal by the minute.
And that leads me into the open primaries. I know somebody introduced an amendment yesterday that would get rid of the open primaries.
Right.
And for my money, that's the thing that probably hurts the party the most, is the open primaries, as far as getting people elected who really represent what we here, especially in Ori, are.
Right.
The open primary, what you have is you have Democrats crossover. They vote Republican in the primary, and they vote for that middle of the road Republican. And then we, the people, end up holding our noses and voting for a Republican in the general that we really don't want to vote for. And I think that that's one of the biggest problems we have in that state. And when I moved down here, I was shocked that they had open primaries, because even in New York, they know enough not to have open primaries.
And it was Mr. McKissick, again, who introduced this just recently. And why now? I mean, because of his upcoming reelection. But this should have been done a long time ago. If you really care about the people, you really care about the party, you would take care of these issues. And another thing that he should have done was make sure that the precincts in every county, that's his responsibility, are functioning properly. Ours was not. We didn't know much about the precincts. A lot of people didn't, because we've been kept in the dark. And we're waking up, and we need to get active. And it's not my husband said yesterday, he said, because my husband did serve in the House. He said it's not people who talk that frightens these men and women in the State House. It's those who take action.
Yeah, I want to give credit where credit is due. It was Freedom Caucus member Senator House Representative Rob Harris who introduced the bill to close the primaries, and he's also the individual who got it reduced from $5,000 to $750 if you had any sort of election question, and you wanted to have that adjudicated before the state executive committee. And that in of itself, I have significant problems with. Now, I am absolutely okay with the concept of let's don't have someone who's just a sore loser who loses a race and just, because they want to pursue that. So I had actually noted that if you're going to charge them anything, it shouldn't be any more than what they had to pay to get into the race for starters. And I'm not real clear, because I thought Adam Morgan made a great point when we had him on. That's okay. I'm not real clear whether it ought to be automatically, if you lose your position before the state executive committee and they say no, that you then don't get your funding back. Because, you know, Adam said, if you go and let's say that the vote is close, but they determine that it wasn't, you know, it wasn't in your favor, I don't know that you necessarily should lose that money. It should be returned to you. But if you go up there and they go, look, you know, you lost by like 25%, dude, it wasn't close, got it. But let's say that what you have is something that really doesn't necessarily pertain to a specific race. Like I know with Lauren and Martell, she was not trying to have her race overturned, but there were several constituents who said, look, I went to vote and there were problems at the polls. Either I was given the incorrect ballot, or the system was down, or something was done inappropriately. The poll manager was not adequately trained, whatever the case may be. So she had gone before the state executive committee with 50 different witnesses who had seen and experienced some type of problem at the poll. And 50 people, and some of those were actual experts in their particular fields, and whether it was with computers and dealing with the ES&S rather. And Drew McKissick, you know, by decree said, well, I'm going to give you guys all 20 minutes combined. Well, 50 people can't talk in 20. What is that? Do you get 15 seconds apiece? What kind of nonsense is that?
Truly. It's evident, not because of what we're saying, but because of his behavior, that he really does not care much about the party. I am running as a candidate. I did approach Mr. McKissick at first, had never even heard of him, and told him, you know, I'm running, and explained to him why. And he said to me, we don't get involved in primaries, which turned out to be totally not true. Yeah. Not only did he do several mail outs for my opponent, Russell Fry, before he even filed, he also secured Trump's endorsement. And that is, President Trump did not meet with any of the other candidates. That's wrong. We put a lot into the race. Personally, I did it because I see the direction our country is going, and I am very concerned with this Marxist agenda. But I see it in the Republican Party, Shannon and John.
I agree with you.
And I'm concerned. And on that note, and I'm sure you all know, just Ronna McDaniel and one of her biggest donors, Scott Bessent.
Yeah.
I mean, a former partner of George Soros. That is frightening.
Speaks volumes.
It sure does. It sure does.
And Drew's her vice chair.
There you go.
There you go.
And I'm very, you know, this is very, and it's. You really got to be careful when you start talking about these things, because you really don't know. You know, I don't want to make any accusations. I know you don't either, or whatnot. Right. But yet, hey, this is a fact. Yeah. This is a fact. This was a former partner who borrowed $2 billion from Soros, so they had a good relationship. Okay. Yeah,
they were not just loosely affiliated.
Thank you. Yes. So yeah, I'm very concerned. So I see it not only at a national level, but now it's being brought here. And another thing, Shannon, from Darlington County, this is something I really like to say, is from Darlington County. I look to my east, you know, and Horry County is in flames. Yeah. I look north, Greenville is a furnace, and Charleston in smoke, Fairfield everywhere. Here in Darlington right now, because I'm exposing the corruption and it makes people uncomfortable. And all I'm showing is, look, our state is going purple, blue. We are not the red state that you wish we were, that you believe that we are. And so that's making some waves. But
and that's what John and I are doing too. We're actually, you know, we try to go vote by vote, and we share the same screenshots that the Freedom Caucus takes, and we point out, look, if you were a conservative, here's how you would have voted. And you can see by our Horry delegation, they never vote conservative. I mean, well, I shouldn't say never. They did vote conservative on the constitutional. I don't even want to call it constitutional carry, because that's not exactly.
They watered it down enough.
Right. It's like they watered it down so much, I'm not sure what to call it. Sort of some kind of carry. But by and large, they consistently vote like liberals, like Democrats, flat out. And we have to make sure that we put a spotlight on that, because I know, you know, sunlight is the best disinfectant.
That's it.
And sunshine is important. And to your point about Marxism, that's one of the reasons why I had She Van Fleet from Loudoun County, Virginia, come and speak to the women's group here in Ori, because she did escape from communist China.
Right.
And so she said, listen, she was absolutely stunned to see the exact same techniques and
The tactics.
ideologies, tactics taught right here. She said, I thought I was coming to a free country and free from the the entanglements with Marxism, and yet I get here and whoa, I'm seeing some of the same things I saw when I lived in China. And folks just have to wake up to that realization. I would say that the better part, I think nearly every Democrat, there may be one or two examples that are not Marxist, but virtually every Democrat, whether they would claim the title or not, they're Marxist. And Dan Bongino has famously said, and I use his quote all the time, most Republicans are really Democrats, but no Democrats are really Republicans. So that's why we're seeing this problem in our state, is that we have people that are just running with the R beside their name. And unfortunately, voters are so busy with life that they can't be bothered to take the time to actually follow what's happening in Colombia.
And we're paying the consequences for that.
Yes, we are.
No doubt.
Yeah, we're paying.
Well, yeah, all you have to do is look at the legislation that goes through.
That's it.
It's all big. It's all big government stuff.
Yes, sir. And and I point out, I homeschooled for 15 years. I was busy. But I'm telling people, okay, you might be busy with life. These bills that are being passed, this legislation will affect you and it will affect your kids. So get a little bit, make an effort, schedule a little time to look into what's really happening, because it's going to affect us greatly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I, as you know, I ran because I saw the communist tactics being used here in America. Yeah. And it's very concerning. It's being used right now here in our state also. And it's frightening.
Well, Barbara, we so appreciate you taking the time to stop in with us to talk about this very, very important issue. And John and I are going to cover some additional bad bills that have been presented before the state that we need to make sure we get eyeballs on. Right. But I hope, and I know John joins me in this, that we will see you again in some capacity as an elected official, because we need voices like yours. We need people who are Christian, who are passionate, who are conservative. And so I applaud you for your efforts. And I like the idea of partnering with you to make sure that we do something to stop what is happening to our state. But thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure. I do want to say that I'm no longer calling myself a conservative Republican. I am now a biblical conservative, because that word conservative has soaked up that cesspool that you've talked about. Yeah. And apparently everyone in that cesspool is calling themselves conservative. And so it's lost its true meaning. Thank you, John, and thank you, Shannon.
Nice to see you, Barbara.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. Well, I think that was fantastic, and I really appreciate her stopping in, and I do hope that we see her again in some sort of elected capacity, because we need voices like Barbara's to continue to spotlight what is going on in our state in terms of what's happening at the local level. Because, we've said it before, John, we see this local pattern where they get into local office and they gradually make their way up to becoming either a U.S. congressman, or they, Tim Scott, Lindsey Graham, they become a U.S. senator. And so then we see this very problem that we had here locally manifest itself in the federal government, and everybody goes, oh, how do we get rid of Lindsey Graham? Well, the time to get rid of Lindsey Graham was when he was a local politician, not once he becomes a U.S. senator, where he has access to show me the money. And once that happens, as you know, it's very difficult to remove someone if they are financially, if they can go out there and spread the money around. Yeah, they're going to buy those votes.
And Senator Graham said the other day, and I'll paraphrase, hey, if you want your voice heard, run for office. That's not. That's not how this works. You're supposed to be my voice, but if you want your voice heard, run for office. I mean, that's not everybody can do that. You're there to represent us, and you're not. So
right. And if I'm not mistaken, that was spoken to a Marine veteran. Was that correct?
I think so.
It was and I was absolutely appalled. I said, "What are you saying?" But that's very evident that his ideology, his philosophy, whatever, the way he looks at voters, that's what it is. Look, I'm the kingmaker. I get to make the decisions. And if it happens to be that my decision is something you agree with, so be it. If you don't agree with it, I don't really care. I know that when I was speaking with Representative Morgan, he said that it was Adam Morgan, it was very unusual for constituents to even call their representatives. And I think that goes back to what I discovered at one of our local meetings here, that the constituents, for whatever reason, lack of motivation, I'm not sure, they do not know how to contact their local representatives. And so I asked the chairman, Roger Slagle, if we could do something. He said, Shannon, that's been posted on our webpage since I guess November when the elections were over, and so all the ways to do it.
Contact info, yeah.
So yeah, to that end, let me do this now. I'm gonna make sure that this is up there because I want people to be able to see this if I can do it. If it'll let me add it, here we go.
You know, the good thing about Barbara is that Barbara is the proverbial squeaky wheel, you know, and that's a good thing. You know, you want somebody out there who's squeaky, who's screaming, and people say,
Yes.
"Oh, what is she talking about?" And a lot of stuff that she talked about in the campaign for 7, it's true.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it's true.
Yes.
I mean, you see it. You didn't see it then, perhaps, but like you said, that, you know, sunlight is the best disinfectant, and the more you shine light on it, the more you realize that this is look, this is a cabal. That's what it is.
Yes. So on our ticker there, I've actually got the webpage, www.scstatehouse.gov. You go to that and you can get directly to whoever your legislator is, whoever your, whether they're in the state or the house, and then it'll get right to their page. You can call them, you can email them. I recommend calling. Emails don't typically work, but you can certainly call them. And you may not get them directly, but you'll get someone that'll answer, and you can leave a message if you don't get them directly. But you do need to know who your representative is. And I will say this, I think there may be some problems with the page because I went to it on my phone. And what I found is that according to the SC Gov page, I put it in and you type in your information onto your phone. I don't know if you can see that. If I turn it this way, you can see a little bit. And it then, you know, it tells you who it is. Well, I have a little problem with it because it says here, this is correct. The senior senator, Lindsey Graham, junior senator, Tim Scott, my U.S. representatives, District 7, Russell Fry. That's correct. Here's where I don't understand. It says my South Carolina state senator is South Carolina Senate District 33, Luke Rankin. And then it says South Carolina House District 61, Carla Schusler. So it has everything updated. But if you go look at the new map of the lines they've drawn, it actually shows that Luke Rankin is not my state senator, but Goldfinch is now my state senator. Now, I hope it is Luke Rankin, to be quite honest with you. That would kind of make me happy, and I'm not even going to say why, but I think you can probably figure it out.
Right.
Luke Rankin is a Democrat, and he votes like one, consistently votes like one. So he is absolutely, I think every single member of the Ori delegation, bar none, there are no exceptions. Every member of the Ori delegation should be primaried. Every single one of them, and I hope they're defeated because none of them have exhibited any backbone to push back against the leadership in the House or the Senate and vote in the way that the people of Ori County would like for them to vote. So I'd like to see them all, from Jackie Hayes all the way down. I don't care who you are. You should all be primaried, and we should get new elected officials and hopefully genuine, as Barbara put it, biblical conservatives.
And
not these cesspool conservatives.
And the primary process for the party is such an important thing. And the fact that we have open primaries, not to go back to that, but that's where the road always leads. The fact that you have the open primaries makes it even more difficult to get incumbents out because name recognition, 1, and that's 2, as I mentioned, the Democrats will jump in and vote for the Republican that is doing their bidding anyway. They don't want a Freedom Caucus type person. So the Democrats will come in and help out. And that's a major problem. And the fact that there are Republicans, and the majority of Republicans, it seems, that are against closed primaries tells you all you need to know about how comfortable they are in their positions in Columbia.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what needs to happen in every single county and district across the state of South Carolina. I don't have that vision, but I do think that we have got to get people in every county to agree with what you just said, that we need a closed primary, because I'm often told, even the lieutenant governor told me that there'd be problems if we had a closed primary in places like Darlington, where you have Democrats and they would be able to basically push out Republicans or whatever. I don't remember. Her reasoning was something, well, it was political. It was garbage. It was hogwash. At the end of the day, we need to have closed primaries. And if it means that in certain areas we have Democrats get elected, well, this is what it says to me, John. We'll just know they're actual Democrats. They won't have an R beside their name, because right now we're electing Democrats, but they just have an R beside their name.
Right. Yeah. Like you said, we have
So
a super majority right now. And what good does it do us? Really? What good does
absolutely
it do us?
nothing.
Oh, you have to look at, I mean, look at the Volkswagen bill. I mean, that's all you have to know. That is textbook crony capitalism, textbook. And yet you
Yes.
have the Democrats up there supporting it, and you have a whole lot of Republicans that supported it. And I'm sure that if you polled people around the state as to whether there were better things that they could do with $400 million cash instead of it going to the seventh largest corporation in the country, I would bet you they could find better things to do with that money.
Absolutely. How about fixing our roads? I know I harp on that, but I do frequently travel across the state because I go home to York County to see my mom and my siblings and my other family, and so I am often on, whether it's, I'm on I-95, I'm on I-20, I take 77, I do 85, I've gone to Spartanburg, to Greenville, I'm on I-26, and I'm just telling you right now, those roads are, I-26 is a death trap. I think somebody said, one of their pastors made the statement that I-26 was literally the highway to hell because it's in such bad repair. So that money would have gone a long way towards repairing the roads. And not for nothing, I believe the last time I got an estimate from what it would cost to build I-73, it was in the neighborhood of $1.2 billion.
Right.
So what are we giving these guys?
Yeah.
And how
1.3
many
and yeah,
jobs? Yeah.
1.3
Yeah.
in whatever you need as far as investments are concerned, and then $400 million cash. It's bill
Yeah.
tax breaks and the like. 1.3 billion. And when I was watching the exchange the other day between Representative Morgan and I believe it was Representative Rutherford, and he brought
Yes. Yeah.
up
Todd Rutherford.
yeah, and he brought up the Amazon deal up in New York and Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, and he was basically trying to compare Adam Morgan to Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. That whole thing was just so mind-boggling. The idea here in South Carolina is we attract businesses because we have it set up in such a way, and that's the government's role, is you have to set the table to attract corporations. You shouldn't have to give them extra benefits on top of that, like tax breaks, etc. It should be a clear playing field for everybody. Small business, big
Right.
business, everybody should be in pretty much in the same boat. You come in, here's our low taxes, here's our low cost of living, here's why here's our education system, here's why you want to come here. You shouldn't have to give tax breaks and incentives on top of that. And if you have to do that, that tells me that, guess what? The taxes are too damn high, to quote that guy who ran
Yes.
for office up in New York.
Yeah.
Right. The taxes are too high. And that was the case up in New York, was that the buried lead in that whole story was that then Mayor de Blasio and then Governor Cuomo both favored that deal. And that told me that they were admitting that they knew that the cost of doing business in New York was way too high.
It's too high.
So that was the
Yes.
buried lead in all of that. And Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, of course, she was right for the wrong reason.
Right. Yeah. She was right, but she had
was
it wrong.
right for the
Why
wrong
she was
reason. Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that would have been great. But if you're going to do that for Amazon, of all businesses, if you're going to do that for Amazon, you have to do that for everybody. And I made that point when I was running. What about Joe's Hardware? Why doesn't Joe's Hardware get that break? Obviously, that's not going to be for much, but at least proportionally speaking, everybody should be in that
Right.
in the same boat. And to compare those two, I just blew my mind. I couldn't believe that even came up. But all they're trying to do there, the Representative Rutherford is trying to play gotcha with Adam Morgan. But guess what? It doesn't work. And
Yeah, it didn't
1.3
work.
billion and then 400 million. I was thinking about this when coming off that tragic shooting in Nashville, and everybody clamoring for security at schools, etc. And
Right.
I could do a whole show on that because I was in the middle of all that up in New York. But
Right.
where my kids went to school in New York State, what they did was they had 2 retired police officers and young fit guys, 45, 50 years old, 2 retired police officers assigned to the school. They were armed, had a full carry permit. They wore golf shirts and khakis. One worked the door with the other person, a civilian who worked the door, and one patrolled the perimeter. And they were there for 8 hours a day. They worked for 180 days. I mean, just do the math. They paid them $25 an hour. And the cost to the school of having 2 armed guards there full time during the day was $72,000 a year. So if you took that $400 million that you gave Volkswagen, you could have 2 armed guards, same situation, for 5,555 schools around the state. That's what you
Right.
should be doing with that money. Don't tell me that you're worried about the children, and then hand blank checks to large corporations. It's not how it works.
Absolutely. My son goes to a private Christian school, and after this happened, my mother called me and she said, tell me that Sean's school has police or armed presence there. And I said, they do, Mom. I said, it's a retired New York officer who actually was there during 9/11. And Mr. Kruger is armed, as you note. He has a carry license. So pretty much the same thing you just said. He's kind of in a pair of khakis and a polo shirt, and he's at the door, and you don't get in. They've got one way in, basically. Now, I will say this. One of the things after watching that, I said, okay, here's what we need to do to kind of fix this, is because you'll note that she shot the glass out to crawl in on the bottom half. So my thought process is we need to go to all of these doors that are glass, and on the bottom half, we need to put a piece of steel so that they can't shoot that out and crawl in. Now, if they shoot the top half in, then they've got to grab the door like this to pull themselves up. And when they do that, they're going to be exposed to Mr. Kruger there with his weapon. So I think that would be another way to kind of remedy that. I know we don't like to think of putting our kids in a situation where we got to put steel doors up or whatever, but if they're not going to provide any other safety mechanisms, what it is.
There's plenty of ways to do that. And like I said, I was in the middle of a lot of that, trying to plan up in New York accordingly. And the other thing that we always have to watch for, and I would encourage all principals and superintendents and anybody in the school board to keep this in mind, is that whole idea that your school may be attacked, it has to be a fresh idea. You can't let this go for a month and go, oh, well, don't worry about it. And that's what happens. That's just the nature of life. If people say they get relaxed, they get comfortable, and they get a little lax, and you'll see situations where there is a door in the back of the school that's propped open, or they're making deliveries and somebody left the door open and they just come in. And that happens quite a bit. You have to be diligent, constantly diligent over these things. You have to have drills, and people say, oh, you don't want to scare the kids with drills. Look, it's not scary. You just explain to the kids what you're doing. And here, look, if this ever happened, if there was a fire, if there's some, you have to explain to children.
Whatever,
Children are smart.
Yep.
And they know what's going on anyway. So don't overthink it. And you have to be on top of this thing 24/7. And the best way to do it is right at the point of entry. You have to have somebody at the point of entry, and the other person, like I said, walking the perimeter. And that's what the government should be doing with funding. And they need to look into that. And especially, as we just talked about, you have so many people moving down to this area who were, like me, retired New York City police officers, or they're retired from Boston, or retired from Philadelphia, wherever, out in Cincinnati, Cleveland. They're coming down to this area. They had their careers in law enforcement. They're 50 years old, maybe younger, maybe a little older. They have their pensions. They have their health insurance, so you don't have to pay health insurance. You're talking about guys that want to make some money on the side, who love having the summers off, who love having the holidays off, who are very happy working 180 days, and they're just looking for something to do. And they're professionals, highly trained professionals. That's what you want. We're not talking about hiring, somebody who has no training. Yeah. That's the one issue I have about arming teachers.
Yeah, I'm against that.
Well, I would have no problem with it if that teacher was like me. I mean, I was retired law enforcement.
Right.
I was part of you're right. I was part of emergency services. I had been through all the training. I've been through all the hostage training. I've been through every training you could possibly go through. So if you have somebody in my position or your position, or retired military police, retired law enforcement, and you're in the classroom, there's no reason that you shouldn't have a gun. No reason.
I often said when people bring up teachers, I said, I work with some teachers who I would not want them to carry scissors.
Right, exactly. And it's not for everybody.
Yeah,
that is not. And putting somebody, just because they're very good with a firearm, doesn't mean that they can handle that stressful situation. Yeah, it's a totally different thing. And having been through all of that, I never carried my gun in school. I just, I didn't feel the need for a lot of reasons. One of which was, I hate to even point this out. I taught in an all boys school where we had 650 young men between 14 and 18. That is not a soft target. They're not coming into a building with 700 men. You're not doing it. I hate to say that, but that's a big part of it. But I never felt the need. But if I was called to do that, I would certainly do that because I was trained to do it. But to just expect people to react in the right situation because they have a permit, there's a lot of training that goes into that. So if you had people who were in our position, retired law enforcement, whatever, and they worked in the classroom, I don't see why they can't carry.
Yeah, I when I went through, came back because we were obviously I'm military, and then my husband was active duty Army, and so we traveled in different assignments until he retired. So once we retired and came back to South Carolina, I then got my permit to carry, because at that time there was no open carry even allowed. And I remember going through the class, and there were some individuals who they passed, if you will, but I remember thinking to myself, "Dear God, if that person can carry it, is frightening to think that that's something that's allowed." But as long as they're not going to be carrying that in a classroom with kids, I'm
Right.
fine with it. Now, the last school I taught at in South Carolina was Chester High School down in Chester County. And we did, as you noted, we had the drills, someone's on campus and things of that nature. And our classrooms were set up in kind of an old style. So almost every single classroom had a door to the inside of the school, if you will, and a door that from the outside in. So it was there was a lot of outside entrances to try to
Right.
cover. And so I think that system has got to go away. But it was what it was. So one of the things I did with my students is we actually talked about what we would do. And so in every class, because we only had 4 classes a day, and I had 3 because they were block classes, 90 minutes. So in each class, I had 5 gentlemen that their job was to move a big file cabinet in front of the window. We had one of those long, kind of narrow windows that you could turn sideways, bust it out, and get in there. So I said, your job is to move this file cabinet in front of that window so they can't shoot through the window, and see us. And then I had other students whose jobs were to pile desks up in front of the 2 doors that you could come in. And I told them, I said, all right, now if they get, and then meanwhile, I said, okay, so literally every student in my class had a job, and none of it was go hide behind your desk. It was either you're moving something in front of a window, you're moving something in front of one of the 2 doors, or your job is to get anything you can find, a stapler, a pair of scissors, books, whatever you can find, in anticipation of this person coming through the door or window or whatever. And if they do, your job is to throw that at them so that I can then tackle them. And I said to the students repeatedly, I said, now guys, once I tackle this person, don't let me die in vain, get over there and take the gun away from them. So I had multiple of my coworkers said to me, what are you teaching in your class for this? And I said, what do you mean? Because everybody says, we don't want to be in your room. We want to be in Grady's room. She knows what to do.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what are you telling the students to do? And they go, well, we tell them to get in a corner and put their desk up and hide behind their desk. I was like, oh, so fish in a barrel. Okay.
Yeah.
I said, no, we're not doing that.
What? That's why it's so important too. And like I said, I would encourage principals and administrators and people on the school board, et cetera. You have to engage somebody, a professional, and there are a lot of companies that do this. You have to have them come into your school and do an evaluation, an independent
Yes.
evaluation of what the best way is to secure the building. And they'll tell you to start with obviously with people at the points of entry, but you can't be at every point of entry. But there are other things to do. There are things that they will suggest that you purchase those door stops from the inside, yes, so people cannot get in to the classroom. How to make sure that all your desks are out of the line of sight. That's not always possible because of construction, particularly on old schools. That's something that they take into consideration now, but they didn't years ago. There are a lot of things that can be done to make sure that your school is as safe as possible. And like I said, I would encourage every school district to look into that. Hire, even if you have to bring in somebody from outside, even if you had to bring in somebody from New York. I mean, when I went to a big consortium up in New York at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and they had professionals from all over the place come in and talk to us about how to secure your school and all the suggestions. They showed video, they showed things that law enforcement is used to seeing and teachers were not.
Right.
So it was the guy that I went with, who was a teacher by trade, and I was police officer first. I was used to seeing those things, and he was like, wow, I never even thought of that. I mean, that's what happens, because your vision as an educator is not the vision of someone who has a law enforcement background. So I would encourage everybody, invest some money in that. And this is a situation where the government and local people in office and school boards, you have to be proactive. You can't do this after the fact. That's probably the biggest problem that we have with government in the United States, is that we're never proactive. This is an easy one. Be proactive, secure your school, and make sure that parents are much more comfortable with their children going to your school.
Yeah, so I mean, I know obviously, folks, the reason we're talking about this is because the tragedy that took place in Nashville, but there are numerous schools across South Carolina that do not have school resource officers, and a significant number of private schools that do not have armed security as well. I remember, gosh, many years ago, when I went to high school, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, as my son likes to say, there was no prohibition to bringing weapons to school, and the guys would have gone hunting early that morning. They'd come in, they had their rifle in the back of their truck, their rifle rack, and they would have their weapons in the back of their truck. And even when I was a freshman, we took PE. They being the wildlife guys, came out there, and they trained us on how to fire not just bow and arrows, but also how to fire shotguns and, gun safety. And so now I think, gosh, they would never do that. So we've gotten further and further away from really training people not to be afraid of weapons, but to respect them and to be prepared in all circumstances. Because I know there was a situation where, this is back, I think, in the 80s, a shooter came onto the campus, and the principal went out to his vehicle and retrieved his own weapon and came in and stopped the threat before it actually led to anyone being injured, which is why you never heard about the story, because nobody died. So that is what I think we really need to get back to. And going back to teachers, as you said, if you have a teacher who is him or herself, retired military, or not necessarily even retired, if they've had significant military training or law enforcement training,
you could still be in the guard, and be be in the classroom. Sure,
I'd be fine with it. But I think administrators possibly should be the only other individuals that would be allowed to carry, and they should have to have quarterly minimum. They should have to have quarterly training to go over this, and it should be kind of like a live drill type thing, where they're not just going to the range and shooting at a still target or a paper target, but where they're literally able to, do sort of like a scenario, a simulation, where they're actually going through a school and having to put down the bad guy or whatever. I know to even think we have to do something like that is heartbreaking to me, but it's where we're at, folks. That's where we're at. So, somebody else said, I don't know who it was, it was a Democrat, I'm sure, that they recommended that all schools be closed until we ban weapons. Well, I guess those kids never go back to school then. I'm not for that. I am absolutely adamant that the Second Amendment gives me the authority. No, actually, it doesn't give me the authority. It protects the authority given to me by God to be able to carry. So I'm all for that. But we do have to address this pivotal issue, and it's not by keeping gun-free zones. That is not how we do that.
No, that's one thing I'm certainly not a fan of. And it's one thing I was really surprised about when I got down here, was that you can have private businesses say, guns allowed here, like shopping malls and things like that. Even in New York, if you have a full carry, you carry the gun wherever you want. I mean, other than going to the airport, you're not going through security. You can carry your gun in the airport, but you can obviously not going to go through security. But up there, if you have a full carry permit and it's not easy to get one, you may carry your weapon wherever you want. And it's all concealed up there, which I prefer as well. I mean, I like concealed carry. Is you keep them guessing, keep them guessing. But when I'm retired law enforcement and I'm in a shopping mall, or I'm in a place like that, especially a shopping mall where so many of these shootings have taken place, it needs to be in that mall, up out front, that says, "Hey, no guns in the mall." And that's something that we have to address as well. Is that these gun-free zones? I mean, that's just an invitation. The movie theater out in Colorado years ago, the same thing. That's just an invitation. Like you said, you're a sitting duck in there. But if someone knows that, hey, you know what, this theater, there could be 10 cops in this theater, off duty, retired, whatever, that's a problem. They're not going to come. It's always, I could teach a class on this. It's about soft targets. It's always about soft targets. I taught in a school, as I said, all boys, 600 guys between 14 and 18. Across the school was a middle school, a public school, government school, grades 6, 7, and 8. And then across the street on the other corner was an elementary school, which was pre-K through 5. Where's the softest target? Well, the elementary school, pre-K through 5, with all female teachers and all little kids. They're not coming into my building. It's a fact of life. And that's something that you have to address as well. Each school is completely different. So your approach is going to be completely different. It's not something that can come from the school board and say, okay, we're doing this in all the schools. Every school is unique. So
they're all going to have their own
have a professional come in and review. And, people say, oh, you scare the kids. You have to drill. You have to drill. You have to do these and say, look, guys, this is precautionary. They get it. They know where they live. They know what the times are. They know exactly what's going on. We always did fire drills. So there's no reason you can't do
tornado drills where I'm here.
Exactly. Yeah. Storm evacuations. Yeah, it's part of life. It's not going to scare kids. Kids much rather be prepared than not.
Absolutely. So I'd rather have my kids be a little bit, upset by a drill than have my kids be scarred because they were not adequately prepared or dead because they weren't adequately prepared and the staff didn't know what to do in the situation. Now, even this school, it looked like they did, because as soon as she shot the windows out, you saw the alarms immediately started going off. So they had some sort of system in place.
Oh yeah. And then the principal runs towards the trouble, which is what always happens. And the principal is the point person of implementing your plan. And the first thing that always happens, God help me, is that the principal gets taken out. And then what happens to your plan? That's exactly what they tell you when you go to these classes, is that the school administrator cannot be in charge of the plan, because you're usually the first person in the office up front, that there has to be representatives on each level or in each section of your school. And there has to be a backup person, and there has to be a plan in place. Yeah. And the more that you put that out there, and the more that you put out the fact that these schools are prepared, the less likely that is to happen.
Yeah, I know there for a while there was some talk here in South Carolina about having, and I think not just here, but multiple states, having veterans, armed veterans, be able to, volunteer to do protective duty at the various schools. I mean, I think there's a myriad of opportunities for correcting this issue, but again, none of them are gun-free zones. That is not the way we fix this. So I hope that we will take that to heart and address it in a way that makes sense, that's responsible. But I know you realize with me that we got a lot to do, and that's going to probably happen at the federal level before it does at the state level. But in the meantime, we have a lot of other issues here in our state in terms of bad bills. Just very briefly, I'm going to kind of highlight some of that information so that people like Cobb Hunter. I'm a female. I don't really understand this. They put forward a bill, House Bill 3563. It's called the tampon tax exemption. This bill is going to exempt the sale of feminine hygiene products from sales and use tax. And the fiscal impact of that would be $7,325,000 reduction in tax revenue. It would essentially raise taxes because we already have exemptions on sales tax. Then we have more exemptions than on sales tax that we collect. So instead of adding addition, to this exemptions, is going to increase the burden to other taxpayers. So we should eliminate the exemptions and drastically lower the rate. So rather than, I think he's right, rather than continuing to have exemptions, why don't we just cut our tax rate in half so that it's not so costly to the rest of the state in general. Then we have another bill by Sandifer, House Bill 4086, regulating residential contractors. It's a laundry list of regulatory changes for residential contractors. The objections to this is the bill's far too long, and it really, you can't even explain it in a rational, abbreviated fashion. It would take too long. There's a myriad of bad bills. I'm not going to get to all of them, but I wanted to talk about some other things. Like here we have South Carolina Senate Bill 31 by Hutto, eliminating the audit requirements for small towns. Oh my God, no. This bill eliminates the annual financial record audit requirement under Section 5-7-240 for municipalities in the state with less than $500,000 in total annual revenue. In lieu of an audit, these municipalities may elect to compile financial statements. Listen.
Or not.
Right, or not. So obviously the objections will be it reduces accountability. The taxpayers' funds should be carefully guarded. Transparency is the best disinfectant, and cities that have not complied with this transparency requirements to have their finances audited annually should be given greater scrutiny, and not less. And if a city truly cannot afford an audit, then they cannot afford to be a city, and they should be unincorporated. Hello. And I'd go one step further. In this example, it says there are municipalities out there with less than $500,000 in total annual revenue. All right. John, how much money do we give to the Myrtle Beach Chamber of Commerce?
Yeah, it's a ton.
$52 million. Yeah. So they're getting more money than a lot of the small municipalities across our state. And gee, did you know we can't audit that? We can't do anything with that because they tell us it's a private entity. Well, how about we stop giving tax dollars from the public to private entities? Or if they are given tax dollars, they then have strings attached to those tax dollars. And one of those strings leads to, drum roll please, an audit.
Audits.
Because I'd like to know whose pockets are being padded with these millions of dollars that are being given out to the Chamber of Commerce. And then we have people say, well, why does the Chamber have so much power? Well, gee, if I got $52 million annually, I'd be pretty powerful as well.
And
I can
on
make all
top of
kind
that,
of
with all the fees they
determinations.
get, yeah, on top of that. And you know what I think is important to put out here is that uh, the government's role, go back to the teacher mode, the government's role is to regulate. Which means to keep regular. All right. That's just to make sure that you set the parameters and then you get out of the way. It's not the laissez-faire. It's not hands off. The government has a role, and we small government people fully understand that. The idea of limited government. So you have to keep regular things like small town audits. Okay, that's the role of the government. You have to make sure that nobody's skimming money and hey, here, give us your portfolio to show us your numbers and show us how it works. And that's good. That's what the government's supposed to do. But they're not supposed to pick winners and losers. They're not supposed to give $400 million to Volkswagen. They're not supposed to give $52 million to the Chamber of Commerce. That's not keeping anything regular, right? That's picking and choosing. So that, when we talk about the government's role here, a lot of people say, hey, why are you talking about the government doing this and the government doing that? The government has a role. It's a limited role, and we're the ones that are supposed to limit it. And obviously things are seriously out of control here and all around the country.
Yeah. As I'm scrolling through here, looking at all of these different bills, some of them are so ludicrous. I almost think it's not worth my time to bring them up. But you got Representative Hyde with the Water Professionals Day. We're going to create a Professionals Day the first Monday of March. Stop it. Stop with this pandering to various people groups. And then here's a wonderful one. We got House Bill 4020 from Mr. Newton, or I don't know if it's a Mr. or Mrs., honestly, expanding film incentives. This bill is going to raise the cap on tax incentives for film production in South Carolina. Well, on the surface, you think, well, that doesn't sound bad, except for here's the fiscal impact. It's $20 million because it's legal plunder. Section 1, it's going to triple the cap on film incentives from $10 million to $30 million. So they're going to redirect tax revenue to offset the production of movies for profit companies. So these companies who are making a profit, we're going to give them 30. Well, do we get that money back? No, we don't.
Yeah.
So
Again, it tells me that the rates are too high. It's just exactly what happened in New York. That should be so. You should not have to go around and pick and choose what rates you have to drop on what companies. The rate should be flat. It should be the same for everybody, and it should be low enough to attract businesses on its own. You shouldn't have to give if it is low enough. Then guess what? There is no crony capitalism to be had. There are no deals to make. If it's low, everybody comes anyway. You shouldn't have to write checks off the taxpayer's wallet.
I totally agree with you. My cat wants to get in my lap, and it's just not a good thing.
I closed the door on mine.
Right. So then we got a House Bill 3557 by Smith, which is defining child abandonment. This bill changes the definition of abandonment of a child and specifies that DSS must provide consent for adoption when a child is abandoned, and adds parents who abandon a child to the list of persons not required to give consent for adoption. Doesn't have a fiscal impact to note, but it says it infringes on the rights or liberties. This bill drastically changes the definition of abandonment in a way that will be used to strip qualified parents of their rights to be a part of their children's lives. The current definition of abandonment reads as follows. Quote, a parent or guardian willfully deserts a child or willfully surrenders physical possession of a child without making adequate arrangements for the child's needs or the continuing care of the child. Now, this is what they're going to change the bill to. The conduct of a parent or guardian while being able to, of making little or no provision for the child's support or making little or no effort to communicate with the child, which situation is sufficient to evince an intent to, you know what, I'm not even going to read anymore because that is such legal, pardon my French here, bullshit. This is a very good example of what we have here in this state when we had Mr. Youngers on the other day talking about kids for cash. So now they're basically going to use some kind of legal jargon to take away parental rights and allow someone's child to be stripped from them and adopted out to someone else, to which the state then gets the wonderful $250,000 from the federal government. This is a hell no for me. And what jackass, G.M. Smith, burn in hell. I'm telling you, I'm not even going to be nice about this. That is disgusting. Stop taking away children. Protect our kids. Stop trying to ruin families. He goes on to say at the end here, this very subjective definition will give greater leeway to family court judges to take children away from good, qualified, loving parents, and it will invite and potentially reward the already rampant perjury that occurs in family court, and it will invite parental alienation tactics. Absolutely. A great example. Again, if you listen to our interview with Mr. Youngers, that gentleman was extraordinarily well versed in the law. He understood. He was certainly capable. And under no circumstances should he have been stripped of his parental rights. And he should have at least had 50-50 custody with the kids. But instead, they took his parental rights and they let his wife take his children to another state, and then he only can have a few hours of supervised time with his sons. And so this type of bill in South Carolina really makes me angry. I currently see some issues with my own family, and they've got some issues with a child. He's only 2. It's my niece's son. And I can see how this could absolutely be used to hurt Daxton, my little nephew, my little great nephew. And so there's no way that I'm going to be okay with this. I think this is appalling. And again, I don't know who this guy is or girl is, because they don't, I don't know if it's a man or a woman, and don't want to assume, but I will do this much. You're going to be getting a call from me and some letters from me, because that is a hell no. You're not going to have some other excuses with some legal jargon to take someone who has a high school diploma. They can't even read and understand that and say, oh, well, we think it looks like that you didn't do what you should have done for your child, so we're going to take your child.
Yeah, again, and the government has a role here, but it's not about overreach.
Yes.
They think their role is unlimited, and it's supposed to be limited. That's the whole idea behind why we're here in the first place. Limited government.
Yeah, one of the things I'd like to see is all of our bills need to be plain English bills. No more legal jargon that you need to pull out your thesaurus to understand what it is they're saying.
Right, the party of the first part and the party of the second part. Yeah.
Stop that. Okay, there's no need for it. It's simply done to confuse people, to confuse a layperson. Stop it. You do not need to do that. You can make bills that make perfect sense and not have to have a legal degree to be able to read through the bill and understand what it is. Anytime I see that, a red flag immediately goes up, because I'm like, all right, they're trying to make sure that anybody with just a high school diploma or even a basic bachelor's degree can't even understand what this bill says. So that is done to hide things.
Yeah, that's why the standalone bills are so important. And, if you go back to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, every one of them, all 10, are single sentences.
Yeah.
They're all single sentence. And they guide our lives. And they're single sentences. Why do you need a 2,000-page bill or even a 1-page bill for the most part? It's too complicated. That is too complicated. Look, just lay it out there, be concise, be firm, and put it forward. Like I said, I used to show my students that all the time. Every one of those amendments is a single sentence. I mean, some of them are a bit long, and they had a great use of grammar back then with colons and semicolons. They knew how to use those suckers.
Right.
But those guys could write. But they're all single sentences. So your bill shouldn't be, to the point where the average person or even a highly educated person is looking at it and saying, what is that? It's far too complicated.
I agree with you. In fact, I'd like to see that we get to the point where that is actually, you are not allowed to have a bill that's more than 1 page, period. I think here in the state of South Carolina, we have in the Constitution a prohibition against having more than one issue. We just don't enforce it. So we need to put something like that in place in our U.S. Congress as well, because this pork adding on is not good for us. I'd like to see that.
Yeah, getting
Single
rid of
issues.
riders. Yeah, just get rid of riders in general. Riders are usually where all the pork comes from. And you say, hey, you know what? If you help me out with my program, I'll help you out with your program, and we'll all vote for each other's programs. And then all of a sudden, you're $31 trillion in debt.
There you go. Exactly. So I'd like to see, those two things done. One, it's single, no riders, just a single bill. That's it. You cannot add all this stuff. It can't be more than 1 page. And again, it has to be written in a way that someone with a high school diploma can read it and understand it. And if you need to have a high school senior come and read it and say, I don't know what the heck that says. Okay, rewrite it. You wrote it too complicated. Because I agree with you that they put these bills and they stack them up and they're this high. And none of these legislators are reading that. You think Ocasio-Cortez is reading anything, John?
It's like the tax code. I think the tax code now, the federal tax code, is 86,000 pages.
That's absurd.
Yeah, it should be. There should really. Let's be honest. It should be about 3 pages.
Yeah, and not to pick on AOC, but she is an easy target. So I don't know how she graduated from high school, let alone college. But
with an economics degree from Boston University.
Give me a break. I bet I could have a discussion. Well, you and I both could have a discussion. She probably couldn't even draw a simple supply and demand. curve. So,
she refused to have a discussion with me, so I
of
don't
course,
I don't think
course,
it's gonna
yeah,
happen.
yeah,
So
exactly. Well, folks, we've kind of come to the end of our hour, but we certainly enjoyed having Barbara Arthur on to talk with us early on about House Bill 4066 passing the House and on its way to the Senate. So please, you see scrolling along there at the bottom, the SouthCarolinaStateHouse.gov. Please call your senators and tell them no on that bill. No, no, no. And more importantly, if you live in any district or county across the state and you are a genuine conservative, you believe in the principles that are being upheld by the Freedom Caucus, we want to hear from you. We are looking for candidates to run for office at the local level, whether it be on the county council, whether it be on the city council or state house or state senate. Please reach out, and I want to try to put together a group of people who are going to be able to primary all of these rank and file members who are a part of the Uniparty, and we need to take back control of we the people's house. And so I would encourage you to do that. Final words there, Mr. Cummings?
yeah, and that's why that pledge was put in there, right? Because they don't want anybody primary.
That's exactly right. Well, I didn't sign any pledge. I don't think you signed any pledge.
Nope.
Multiple people. I don't think Barbara signed a pledge. So the voters out there, I don't believe you signed a pledge. But I did say last time on Tuesday that maybe we're going to have to start signing pledges or oaths to be able to vote. But I do want to make a correction on the story from Tuesday. By the way, I was told that it was the list that was given to the individual that was preventing people from coming in was a sheriff's deputy. Turns out they were not a sheriff's deputy. They were, I had worked for Conway Police or Myrtle Beach Police. I'm not sure which it was, but at any rate, whether it's a sheriff's deputy, a police officer, or just a security officer, the idea of having a list of names is highly inappropriate in our constitutional republic. And so I'm absolutely opposed to it.
Quite pleased to hear that the sheriff's office was not involved. I didn't think they would get involved in that. And that's what we were talking about the deputy. If you're the deputy, you look at it and go ahead. But if you're a paid hand to do that, that's why you're being paid. I get that. Most people have security at their meetings, but they shouldn't be bouncers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Unless, someone's again being disorderly.
Unless there's a reason, right? Unless there's a reason. That's
but you don't have
there,
a list.
Right.
Yeah. I think you said it best last time, list. We're not a country of lists.
Nope.
So, all right. Well, folks, thank you again for tuning in. God bless, Godspeed, and we will see you next time.